So what is earnest money? I know for a lot of first-time home buyers that I work with, that's one of the first questions they ask me. So today in this video, we're gonna go over what earnest money is, how much of it do you need, why does it exist in the first place, can you lose it, and is it extra on top of your down payment? Hey everybody, this is Brad Decater with the Decater Real Estate Group, and today we're talking about all things earnest money. So first off, what is earnest money? Earnest money is a good faith deposit from the buyer to the seller in order to show them that they're serious about purchasing their property. So earnest money exists in the first place in order to have some sort of degree of promise from the buyer to make sure that they're serious about the property. Like I said, it's a good faith deposit. The reason it's there is because it is at risk for the buyer to lose if they breach the contract. Now, typically you're going to have a lot of protections against losing your earnest money, what we call contingencies. So some of the contingencies that are going to help you protect that money are the inspection contingency, the appraisal, the financing contingency, the title contingency. All of those things are meant to protect your earnest money. So yes, the earnest money is at risk, but for the most part, you're not going to be losing that money unless you're going to breach the contract. Another note about earnest money is the time frame in which it needs to be available and when that's deposited. So typically, you're going to write the contract and you're going to have your earnest money due within about 48 hours after they accept the offer. So earnest money, it's important to note that it needs to be liquid funds. So if you have $100,000 for a down payment, for example, that money could be tied up in a 401k or stocks or some sort of investment account, and you have the 30 days to actually get that money out to pay for the cash to close on the closing day, because it's going to take about 30 days to close. Though with earnest money, it's a little bit different. If this money's tied up, it's not going to work out well for you. This money needs to be liquid and ready to go. It needs to be deposited into escrow within about 2 days after getting the contract signed. So we need to make sure that that's liquid and ready to go. So how much earnest money do you need? That's a great question. It's kind of a tough one to answer because there's no specific amount other than it has to be of value. So $1 is actually the minimum amount of earnest money that you need. However, in a competitive market like we are now, there is kind of industry standard. So you definitely want to be in line with that to make your offer competitive. In this market, it can be anywhere as low as like 1% of the purchase price up to like 5% of the purchase price. So let's say, for example, a $500,000 house. I would say a middle of the road earnest money would be about $10,000. That's 2% of the purchase price. If you want to make your offer strong and stand out, you might want to go towards $20,000 or $30,000. That would be a much stronger offer if you had more earnest money. The reason the earnest money matters for the strength of the offer is because that's what money's at risk if you were to breach the contract. So for the seller, it's basically like an insurance policy for if you were to get out of the contract, they didn't lose any money, they actually made some money. They don't have to go back to market, losing 2 mortgage payments the whole time they were trying to work with you on the deal. So another question I get asked all the time is it extra, like on top of the down payment? That answer is a simple no. So if you were to have $100,000 down for your loan, that was your down payment, if you put down, let's say $10,000 for the earnest money in the first 2 days of the contract, like we went over before, on the day of closing, about 30 days from then, instead of owing your $100,000 left for the down payment, you'd only owe $90,000. So the earnest money just sits in escrow and it just hangs out there until it's ready to do what it needs to do. And that's most of the time going to be going towards your cash to close. So it's always your money. It's never leaving, it doesn't go to the seller right away or anything like that. It just sits in escrow and waits to be directed. If you're closing the deal, it goes towards your cash to close. If you breach the contract, then escrow will send it to the seller because you breached the contract. So it definitely is not extra. So if you have, $150,000 that you're looking to, use for real estate, down payment, closing costs, and earnest money, it's all the same. You don't have to have extra for that, okay? So can you lose earnest money? Yes, you can. In my 6 years of real estate, though, I've never had anyone lose earnest money, and that's not even a testament to me. It's just honestly very, very uncommon. For the most part, if you're going to lose earnest money, it's because you got cold feet. You just, day 28 of 30 of the closing day, you just decide, hey, I don't want the property anymore. As the buyer, by the way, you always have the right to get out of the contract. It's a unilateral contract in that way. So you can do that, but your earnest money is at risk at that point. But the vast majority of deals that fall through because of a contingency. For example, they get the inspection and they don't like it and they want to get out of the contract. That's protected, so their earnest money comes back to them. Another one would be financing. So the buyer, let's say, loses their job, God forbid, 2 weeks before the closing date. Well, that's going to affect the lender pretty significantly. They're not going to give you the loan anymore if you don't have a job to pay for the loan. So in that case, you would not be able to get the financing to get the loan to close on the house, so you would have to actually get out of the contract at that point. But again, if you have the financial contingency in place, you would be protected from that and you'd still get your earnest money back. So you can see that yes, the earnest money is at risk. That's the whole reason it exists, is because they need to have something tied to the contract to make you serious about actually, fulfilling your promise of getting the loan and closing the deal and doing everything. But it's very, very unlikely to lose that. And again, I've never had anyone lose earnest money. I've never even known anyone in my office that has had their buyers lose earnest money. So it is very uncommon. Even if you did breach contract, you could get into litigation. You could probably fight for it still. So most of the time, the buyer is pretty well protected in that. So that's kind of the basics of earnest money. You know what it is, how much do you need, is it at risk, and is it extra on top of your down payment? So I actually have a couple of bonuses for you regarding earnest money. So number one, I want to talk about the role that earnest money has in making your offer stand out. So I mentioned it very briefly before, but the higher your earnest money, the better your offer. So earnest money is a tactic that we use a lot in getting our offers accepted. It's a great way to make a much, much stronger offer, but without actually paying more for the property. So a lot of times people think that it's all about just, what you pay. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say that there's two buyers and both are offering $500,000 to purchase a house. If one buyer has $5,000 earnest money and the other one has $20,000 earnest money, they're going to choose the person with $20,000 earnest money. That person might even pay $5,000 less, but they have a better terms of the contract. So earnest money is pretty important in making your offer stand out. It shows them how serious you are about getting the property. So there's a little tip for you about how earnest money can work in your favor. And it's pretty awesome because, like I said, the chances of losing the earnest money are very, very low. But by you putting your best foot forward and doing that extra amount of earnest money, it's making your offer stand out and giving you a better chance of getting the offer accepted. And the last little bonus content here is non-refundable earnest money. So in most cases, I don't recommend this, but in some cases, it definitely does make a lot of sense. For a cash buyer, for example, or if you're a person who's able to waive all your contingencies, like maybe you got the pre-inspection before the offer, you're cash, or you're fully underwritten and you can waive the financing addendum, stuff like that, or the appraisal. In that case, there's really nothing that you need protection from with the earnest money. So in that case, I would recommend doing something called non-refundable earnest money. And this is the most strong thing that you can do when making an offer on purchasing a house. When you have non-refundable earnest money, that earnest money won't just sit in escrow. They'll actually give it to the seller right away, and it's non-refundable. There's no way it's coming back. So it's basically telling the seller, like, I am so serious about buying your property. There's nothing that's going to stop me from doing this. Like literally nothing. Like if I leave the contract, you can keep all of the earnest money. So that's the strongest kind of offer tactic that we have when a buyer is willing to either waive everything, or they're a cash buyer, they don't have to worry about the appraisal or the financing, and their positioning makes it so that is a viable strategy. So that's my last tip for earnest money. Hopefully this video was helpful. It's a little more complicated than that, so if you have any more questions, definitely put them down in the comments. I'd love to do some follow-up videos. And if you're enjoying any of this content, I would love for you guys to subscribe and like and share this video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.